Months ago, I got a new sponsor, Americans for Free Markets. Their website's pretty easy to remember, FOR Free Markets for freemarkets.com. They're all about debanking. And then it occurred to me, and it's been asked of me, what in the world is debanking? Do they take your money away? And I said, let's get an expert on. So Senator Pat Toomey is joining us, formerly senator from the great state of Pennsylvania, frequent guest on the show in the years that he was in office. For 12 years in the Senate, he was on the banking committee. Senator, welcome back. It's been a while, and it's good to see you again.
Hey, Hugh, it's great to see you. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. What is debanking? I can read the executive order, and I might read a couple of parts in a bit, but broadly speaking, for the Steelers fans out there, let's make it simple. What is debanking?
Hey, Eagles fans too. Okay, just to be fair.
Okay.
But no, debanking has been very real. And the way I think about it is this really began in the Obama administration, as you recall very well. Obama was quite hostile to certain industries, the gun industry, fossil fuel industries. And somebody concocted a very devious idea, which is we can't pass legislation to inhibit or even ban some of these disfavored industries. So instead, what we'll do is we'll use regulatory powers, and specifically the power to regulate financial institutions, to put a lot of pressure on banks not to do business with companies in these disfavored industries. We called it Operation Choke Point under President Obama. Fortunately, President Trump was not interested in pursuing anything of that nature. But then when Joe Biden took office, he thought he'd revise it. This time it was crypto, which was the particularly disfavored industry. And Hugh, I led an effort as the ranking Republican on the Senate Banking Committee to defeat a nominee for Fed governor because this nominee was actively advocating that we use financial regulators to decide where capital should go and where it should not go. Terrible idea, completely inconsistent with the free economy, with a free society, with a representative form of government where decisions like that, if they're going to be made by government, they should be made by the accountable elected branches. But my point is, this effort over two different administrations was used to deny banking services, the government imposing pressure on regulators to deny banking services for disfavored industry. It's completely wrong. And fortunately, the Trump administration has now gone on the offensive here and is taking steps to forbid regulators from abusing their power in this way. But there's more that needs to be done because this is a travesty when American people have their own government denying them banking accounts.
Well, I want to come back after the break and get into the nitty gritty of what happened under Choke Point 1.0 and Choke Point 2.0. But first of all, how big of a problem was this? Because when President Trump began talking about debanking, sort of an urban mythy feel to it. Was it a real deal? Did it affect hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people? Who are we talking? What magnitude here?
Yeah, it's hard to be precise about that because, of course, it's done under the radar. So I'm not sure exactly, but if you add up all the folks in the energy space, the folks in the gun space, and then the crypto industry, there were certainly in the thousands. And it's individuals, it was businesses, small businesses. It was probably many thousands, Hugh. I certainly don't have a precise number, but if let's keep in mind, if the government can do it and get away with it with a handful of industries, what's to stop them from doing it with more?
Well, that's exactly. How did people come to be aware of this problem? Did they call your office because you were ranking Republican on banking and say, hey, my bank just told me to get lost, or did you find out about it in the Wall Street Journal? How did people become aware of it?
Yeah, no, you put your finger on it. I was getting calls in my office. I was getting calls from constituents saying, I've had my account shut down at the bank that I've used for years, and they won't tell me why. Because, by the way, part of the regulatory abuse was to in some cases, forbid the banks from explaining what they were doing and why. And then it started to become obvious when the pattern emerged that every such call was from one of a handful of industries. In the crypto world, it was very, very obvious during the Biden administration when even individual executives at substantial and really well-run crypto firms couldn't get a mortgage, couldn't get a checking account. when banks were saying, well, we really sorry, we can't do your payroll for your company. I mean, it was really quite an abuse. And again, all driven by regulators who were under political pressure to achieve this.
Stand by, Senator Toomey. I'm going to go to break. I'll be right back with Senator Pat Toomey, formerly of the Senate Banking Committee. He knows all about debanking. Maybe during the break, head over to forfreemarkets.com, forfreemarkets.com, find out more. Continue my conversation with former United States Senator Pat Toomey. He represented the great state of Pennsylvania for 2 terms. He was ranking Republican on the Senate Banking Committee. He's here today on behalf of Americans for Free Markets, FOR, Free Markets for Free Markets. You've heard me talking about them. They've been sponsors for a couple of months. And I always throw in with people that I agree with who believe in free markets. And we're talking about banking. Senator Toomey, which regulators were leaning on the banks to implement the Obama and the Biden agenda by denying financial services to disfavored industries?
Well, during the Obama and Biden administration, it was probably several of them. I think the OCC in particular, the FDIC probably, and it's worth pointing out, Hugh, there was an insidious way that they went about this, which is during the course of reviewing the banks and opining on whether the banks were complying with all of the standards that they're supposed to be complying with, like their capital is adequate, they have sufficient liquidity, their management is functioning properly. All of those criteria are generally objective, but they put in a very subjective one, which they called reputational risk. Now, every business has to worry about its reputational risk, but it's up to the business to decide that. In this case, the regulators were clear to the banks that we're going to give you a bad grade on how you manage your reputational risk if you do business in one of these disfavored categories. That was the mechanism that they used to achieve the political aim that they were given. And that's why it's so important that we eliminate the ability of these regulators to misuse reputational risk as their mechanism for this kind of activity.
That's what I want to drill down on. When I read about reputational risk as a regulatory tool, I immediately thought Bud Light was not aware of reputational risk a couple of years ago, right? That's what happens when you're unaware of reputational risk. But banking, the only way you get into trouble with banking, if you're a hot bank and you're running illegal transactions and you are laundering cash, that is reputational risk. So what were the regulators doing? Simply conjuring up reputational risk? Because I don't know who banks at my bank. I literally have no idea. Right.
No, you're exactly right. So the Bud Light case is an excellent point. Somebody wasn't thinking very clearly about reputational risk, right?
Right.
But it is a fun, and so they should have to deal with the consequences. They made their decision and they have felt the consequences, as it should be. What no firm should have is the government deciding what constitutes your reputational risk. And so what the regulators were doing, this was a complete scam, Hugh. What the regulators were doing, there was no real basis for this. There was no real effect on banks' reputational risk. They were simply saying, we get to decide what constitutes reputational risk, and we're telling you that our decision is, if you bank people in the crypto industry, we think that's a bad management of your reputational risk, and we will ding you accordingly. So it was completely misused. It never should have been there. Regulators should be required to deal with objective reality, quantifiable measures, and reputational risk issues should be decided by the firms who are always concerned about their reputations.
That's an insidious power to give the government, because it's as elastic as an accordion. A regulator can sit there and decide, if you bank Hugh Hewitt, we don't think your reputation is, you are causing us concern if you bank Hugh Hewitt, if he's got an account at your bank. That's infinitely flexible. I'm kind of astonished it's legal under any circumstance. I'm glad there's an executive order, but do they need to put a law on the books to guarantee that not happen in the future?
So the executive order is an excellent first step, because the executive order applies to the folks who are in the agencies under this administration. So that's great. But as you alluded to, at the end of this administration. Another administration could come in and reverse the executive order. So absolutely, we need statutory legislation. And the good thing is there's a very simple solution here. Senator Tim Scott, the chairman of the Banking Committee, has introduced legislation. It's called the Firm Act. And what it does is it simply forbids any regulators from considering reputational risk in their evaluation of the banks they regulate. They can continue, and then they must continue to evaluate based on the objective criteria like capitalization and liquidity and system security and things like that. But they can't use these amorphous, undefined, flexible terms that allow them to just have unlimited control of the banks.
Last question, Senator Toomey, and thanks for the extra time today. Has the crypto industry sailed beyond the shoals now? Are they far enough out beyond the grasp of regulators and markets that they are free of the heavy hand of government?
You know, they've grown so much and become so well established that you would think so, but I never take that for granted. The most important safeguard the industry has, and therefore American consumers, is that there is statutory legislation that creates guardrails for how stablecoins will be regulated, how they can be issued, how they can be used. That's a very important first step. But now there is a really important second step, which is how these markets will function. And legislation is in the works, and I hope it will pass still this year, certainly at the latest the first quarter of next year, to really lay out a regulatory framework for the rest of crypto so that if a subsequent administration were to come along that was hostile, they wouldn't be able to simply unilaterally make changes.
Makes sense to me. Senator Pat Toomey, always good to see you. Keep coming back, and thank you for educating the audience on deep banking. It's not an urban myth. It was real. It's been ended for the time being. Let's hope they put it into the earth forever with a good, strong law. Thank you, Senator Toomey. That's Americans for Free Markets, FOR, freemarkets.com. Let me also tell you about our other sponsor, American Exploration and Production Council.